Welcome to the Real 411. I'm Dr. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜 McGee, and today we're heading to the heart of Memphis, where a silent war is being waged between cutting-edge tech and a community that's been ignored for far too long. Colossus. That's the name Elon Musk chose for his latest XAI supercomputer project. It's big, bold, and no doubt groundbreaking, at least in theory. But there's something more insidious lurking behind this headline-ready tech marvel. You see, in South Memphis, where this gigantic effort operates, the narrative feels very different. It's not innovation that local residents are talking about, it's survival. 35 methane gas turbines now sit in Boxtown, a historically black neighborhood. They're running day and night, emitting formaldehyde, nitrogen oxide, and other pollutants at levels beyond environmental safety standards. But what's even scarier, these turbines didn't need permits for the first year. That, yes, was considered perfectly legal under this exploitable regulatory loophole. Now tell me, how exactly does that happen? When we're supposed to have evolving protections for the air we breathe and the water we drink for our communities? Look, I don't need to tell you that Boxtown, like so many neighborhoods where companies decide to plant these progressive projects, has already endured its share of pollution. Families in Boxtown have lived next to industrial plants for generations. Many are familiar with higher rates of asthma, cancer clusters, and shorter lifespans. And now there's the added strain of Colossus breathing down on them literally. So what do? Well, here's the start. We unpack the truth. Today's episode will dive deep into what's actually happening behind the scenes, how this community's voices are being muffled under the weight of corporate convenience. But also, we will highlight those voices, those fighting tooth and nail to bring attention to the rights and health of Memphis. Because let's be clear, this isn't just about AI, it's about accountability. This is about justice. Let's talk about these methane gas turbines that power this so-called marvel of artificial intelligence. There are 35 of them right there in Boxtown. And these aren't just a few noisy engines pumping out harmless steam. No, these turbines are churning out nitrogen oxide, formaldehyde, and a cocktail of other pollutants. Pollutants, let's be real, should come with warning labels. Let's hear from some residents from Boxtown and Memphis.
Giant leaps in the industry in the past year thanks to the company's supercomputer in Memphis. But while it's keeping the company competitive globally, many in the Tennessee community are pushing back. Stephanie Gosk reports.
In Memphis, Elon Musk is making a play to control the future of artificial intelligence. His company, XAI, says it has built the biggest supercomputer in the world with lightning speed. Paul Young is the city's mayor.
It represents a tremendous opportunity, an opportunity for us to take our economy to the next level.
XAI says it will create $100 million in revenue and hundreds of jobs. But the digital future needs power, lots of it. These are the gas turbines fueling the supercomputer they call Colossus. They emit hazardous pollutants like formaldehyde and nitrogen oxides, according to the manufacturer.
Just over this fence, you can see and hear the turbines churning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Without them, the data center does not function. What's not in dispute is the fact that they are polluting the air. What people don't know is how much of that pollution is reaching nearby communities.
Easter Knox lives 2 miles away.
You smelled it
Yes, Lord.
right away?
I sure did. Well, you know, after they got situated, I started smelling it.
Knox lives in Boxtown, a mostly black, low-income neighborhood in South Memphis,
The health department, they need to be ashamed.
where industry has taken a toll for generations.
There's a lot of people out here who got medical problems like breathing issues.
Cancer risks here are 4 times higher than the national average. Cancer killed her father and other relatives, Knox tells us. Life expectancy here is 9 years less than the national average.
Nitrogen oxide, for instance. Did you know they can inflame the lining of your lungs? They complicate asthma, and they've been linked to heart disease. Formaldehyde, well, let's just say it's known to cause cancer. And all this is happening unchecked as Colossus hums along in its quest to power AI. Now stop and think. If these emissions were venting into wealthy suburbs, would we even be having this conversation? The NAACP doesn't think so, and neither do I. Their recent letters to county officials call on this supercomputer project to halt, citing violations of clean air laws and standards. And they didn't mince words. They referred to XAI's approach as a blatant disregard for the rules meant to protect the public. And the thing is, they're right. How do you allow turbines, 35 mind you, to operate without proper permits when the risks are this glaringly apparent? As a physician, these concerns are not just theoretical to me. Just last month, a fellow physician and friend treated a patient from Boxtown, a grandmother whose respiratory issues have worsened since these turbines started running. She's lived in that neighborhood for decades, already navigating baseline struggles from lingering industrial pollution. And now she's caught in the crosshairs of Musk's vision for progress. For her, it's not about innovation, it's about survival. So I ask you this, where does innovation stop and exploitation begin? At what point do we say that technological advancement costs are too high? Especially when disproportionately borne by the most vulnerable. Boxtown, with its history of disinvestment and environmental harm, is again being asked to shoulder the burden of someone else's future. And I can't help but wonder about a technological breakthrough. There are stories like this of communities and lives disrupted. We're going to peel back the layers of this so-called state-of-the-art project and examine the truth. And as we do that, let's keep one question front and center. Who benefits from it? And at what cost? So let's set the stage, shall we? How does something like XAI's gas turbines emitting known carcinogens in a predominantly black neighborhood become operational without significant oversight? That, my friends, is where our regulatory system showed its cracks, bending under the weight of corporate lobbying and procedural loopholes. Here's how it works. XAI took advantage of a Clean Air Act exemption designed for temporary projects. Under the guise of being temporary, they installed 35 gas turbines without securing air quality permits for their first year of operations. Think about that. 1 year of unchecked emissions in a neighborhood already struggling against environmental harm. Clever, yes, but also deeply troubling. And where were our local watchdogs in all of this? The Shelby County Health Department and Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, the agencies tasked with ensuring regulatory compliance, appeared to look the other way. In fact, their response was so slow that they didn't even hold a public hearing until nearly a year after these turbines went online. What does that tell us about whose interests are being prioritized? Now, understandably, the community in Boxtown feels betrayed. And here's the contrast I want to draw, because this isn't Boxtown's first fight. Back in 2021, this same neighborhood stood up and defeated the Bahia crude oil pipeline, citing environmental risks and health dangers. That victory was significant. It showed the power of collective action and resilience. But here, with XAI, it's different. Why? Because Musk's project didn't arrive with the blunt force of a pipeline company. It came cloaked in the language of innovation and progress. It even managed to exploit regulatory ambiguity to lay its foundation quietly. Let me bring this home with an example. Earlier this morning, I reviewed the public comments submitted to oppose XAI's permit renewal. Many came from residents who described worsening asthma, chronic fatigue, and other health concerns since 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 came online. And yet, decision makers continue to drag their feet, citing ongoing review processes as the turbines continue to run. So the real question here is, what accountability exists for those sworn to protect public health and the environment? When you consider the delays, loopholes, and lack of transparency, it's hard not to see this entire saga as a failure of leadership. A failure ultimately rooted in systemic neglect of poor and marginalized communities like Boxtown. Make no mistake, what's happening in Memphis isn't just a local issue. It's indicative of a broader pattern. Communities across the nation face similar challenges. Giant corporations use regulatory gaps to further their profits, always at someone else's expense. The question remains, how do we ensure that these wrongs don't go unchallenged? By now, You've heard about the regulatory gaps and oversight failures that allowed XAI's Colossus project to flourish unchecked in Boxtown. But let me tell you what happens when communities decide enough is enough. And spoiler alert, it's powerful. Let's start with Young Minds United and Tigers Against Pollution, two incredible youth-led organizations rooted in Memphis. These are high schoolers and college students who rally their neighbors and say, "We will not let this slide." Last Saturday, they hosted a packed event at the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 Museum Ballroom. And listen to this. One of their key leaders, Orion Overstreet, stood up and said, "If this keeps heading in this direction, it's not going to be the Memphis I love to live in." You can hear the heartbreak and hope, can't you? These young voices remind us of what's really at stake. Beyond rallies, they're organizing public comment campaigns and canvassing neighborhoods like Boxtown to educate residents about the health impacts of XAI's operations. This is grassroots activism at its finest. They're not waiting for change to come, they're building it themselves. And it's not just the youth. Boxtown residents, many of whom have been there for decades, are showing up, writing letters and demanding action from local officials. These aren't just protests, they're strength in motion. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐢𝐛𝐿, one of the longest standing residents, once said, "They got money and they do what they want without consulting us." Well, the community is making sure that changes. You know, hearing their stories takes me back to when I attended my first protest. I was just 20 years old, still in med school. It was about cutting funding to a local free clinic. Did I know what to say when I first showed up? Honestly, no. But I learned something that day. Your presence, your voice, even your anger, all of it has power. Grassroots change comes from people who refuse to stay silent. The question we need to ask is this: when a community shows this much resistance, so much resilience, why aren't we prioritizing their real experiences and policy discussions? Data is critical, yes, but so are first-hand accounts from people who breathe this polluted air and drink this water every day. All these stories, they're the backbone of the fight for environmental justice in Memphis. Don't underestimate their power. Grassroots activism isn't just resistance. It's a blueprint for how marginalized communities can reclaim agency, even when the odds are stacked against them. And in Boxtown, they're showing us exactly how it's done. So here's the 411. In Boxtown, technological innovation isn't theoretical, it's personal. While billion-dollar companies chase AI dominance, this Memphis community is fighting for its right to breathe clean air and live with dignity. Regulations have stalled, executives have deflected, but the people, they're rising, young, fierce, and relentless. And if you think this fight is just about one neighborhood in Memphis, think again. What's happening in Boxtown is a blueprint for environmental injustice everywhere. Now's the time to choose a side. Share this episode with your network, call your local officials, support grassroots groups like Young Minds United, because environmental justice isn't a trend, it's a necessity. I'm Dr. Chelsea McGee, and this is The Real 411. Stay informed, stay relentless, and remember, the story is never just a headline.